This is a 2015 Maserati Ghibli SQ4. When it was brand new, just a year and a half ago, its base price was $78,900. With options, it was well over $80,000. And that makes this the single most overpriced car in the entire car industry. Period. Now, I've rented this Ghibli here in Nashville, Tennessee, using a service called Turo, which is this cool company that's sort of like Airbnb for cars. You get to rent other people's interesting cars instead of normal, boring rental cars. Turo has given me a budget to rent cars, and I decided to rent this one because Turo is really the best way to experience the Ghibli. That's because after a few days, you get to give it back. So, why don't I like the Ghibli? Well, I'll start off with a comparison between the Ghibli and another luxury sports sedan, the 2015 BMW 550i. Now, under the hood, the Ghibli makes 404 horsepower. That's pretty good, but the 550i makes 445. The Ghibli has 406 pound-feet of torque, also pretty good, but the 550i has 480 pound-feet. But it's not all about power. Modern luxury cars are all about technology. For instance, the 2015 BMW 550i has a 360-degree camera system. Does the Ghibli? The 550i has a blind spot monitoring system. Does the Ghibli? The 550i has a lane departure warning system. Does the Ghibli? The 550i has a trick night vision camera system. Does the Ghibli? The 550i has a forward collision warning system. Does the Ghibli? The 550i has automatic braking if it detects an accident's about to happen. Does the Ghibli? In the modern luxury car world, high-tech safety features like the ones I've just named are really popular right now, and this Ghibli didn't even offer any of that stuff as options. Actually, I take that back. Shift into reverse and you'll notice a very poor resolution backup camera pop up on the screen. Of course, you'd get a better backup camera in a Chevy Sonic. And here's the kicker. I already told you the Ghibli costs around 80 grand. The 550i has more power, more torque, more safety features, more equipment, and its starting price is $67,500. Add in all of the features I mentioned and you're somewhere right around $70,000, which gives you a lot of money left over to spring for a vanity plate that says LOL Ghibli. Now, Maserati will tell you that I'm wrong because they added some, but not all, of these features for 2016, and that's true, but isn't that kind of the point? I mean, the Ghibli came out way back in 2014, and all these features were already on every other luxury sedan. It wasn't like lane departure warning and blind spot assist was some secret technology known only to a few secret engineers. Everything else had this stuff, and Maserati was like, nah, we're just gonna give it a backup camera, and it's gonna be fine. Plus, the Ghibli's list of problems goes way beyond its lack of equipment. For example, Maserati is owned by Fiat, which is the same company that owns Chrysler. Now, the unfortunate result of this mashup is that when you get inside the Maserati Ghibli, an $80,000 luxury sedan, you're confronted with a lot of switches and buttons borrowed straight out of the $22,000 Dodge Dart compact car. I'm serious. For example, take a look at the door panel with the window switches, the power locks, and the mirror controls. Those are literally lifted straight out of the Dodge Dart. The same thing goes for the headlight switch, the turn signal stalk, and the start-stop button. That's pretty much everything you press and touch just about every time you get inside the car. Now, you might be wondering, what exactly is the problem with a luxury sedan like this sharing switches and buttons with a compact car? After all, if they work, what's the big deal? Well, as I see it, there are two problems with this. Number one is, if I'm paying $80,000 for a Maserati, an Italian luxury performance car, beautifully Italian crafted, I kind of want the features that I touch and look at and press all the time to be a little different than the ones you'd get when you rent a Dodge Dart from Avis. The other problem is functional. When you start adding switches and buttons that weren't designed for a car, they don't always work like they should. A great example of this is the Maserati's turn signal lever. It's borrowed straight out of the Jeep Cherokee, the Dodge Dart, etc. And it works just fine in those cars, but in this one, there's a little conflict because the Maserati has these big metal shift paddles, as it should, being a performance car. So when you go to use use this stock, you're always hitting the shift paddle with your fingers when you're really just trying to put on the turn signal. Now, a real car company making a real luxury sedan would engineer a special turn signal stock that sticks out a little further than the paddles, so there's no conflict with your fingers when you're going to put the turn signal on. But this is what happens when you borrow your turn signal stock from the Dodge Grand Caravan. Speaking of things borrowed from lesser vehicles, the Maserati Ghibli's infotainment system is Chrysler's Uconnect. Now, when you turn it on, it says Maserati Touch Control or Maserati Touch Center, or I don't know, something like that. I don't really care. But this is literally the same system as Chrysler's Uconnect. I don't mean it's slightly similar and borrowed. I mean, it is the same infotainment system you'd get in a Dodge Dart. I have two annoyances about this system in the Ghibli. Annoyance number one is the fact that it's placed right in the middle of the center controls, which is where you'd expect it, and then it's framed by a giant piece of really cheap black plastic. My second annoyance is that the controls for the heated seats and the ventilated seats aren't actual buttons. They're integrated into the infotainment system. This is not a problem unique to the Ghibli, but it is incredibly bad design. Automakers, listen up. If we want to turn on heated seats, I just want to push a button. I don't want to go into some touchscreen menu for climate and then push a little part of the touchscreen that says heated seats to bring up a new menu, and then you can adjust a little lever on the screen. I just want to push a button. Here's another reason I know the Ghibli is not an $80,000 luxury car. Take a look at the panel gap between the door panel and the rest of the trim. This panel gap is insane. It's ridiculously large. You could stick a tube of toothpaste in here, as I shall now demonstrate. All right, time to stick a tube of toothpaste in a Maserati panel gap. All right, here we go. It fell out. It's too big. We need a bigger tube of toothpaste. There we go. Tube of toothpaste in a Maserati panel gap. Now, folks, I gotta be honest, big panel gaps are bad. Panel gaps where you can stick an entire tube of toothpaste between the panels, those are really bad. This panel gap is so bad that if you look closely, you can actually see white paint from the door inside the panel gap. There is no other modern car, luxury or not, with a panel gap this large. Get a 1994 Chevy pickup and the panel gap between the door panel and the rest of the car isn't this bad. And this is an $80,000 luxury sedan. Now, speaking of the infotainment system, I've run into another interesting problem. I cannot get the infotainment system to play any music from my phone, even though there's a simple USB input. I plug in my phone on the USB input and it just says, reading USB device the whole time, reading USB device. It won't actually read the device. Now, I know what you're thinking. Maybe it's because the car isn't compatible with Spotify, which is what I use to play music. Well, that's a great point. Spotify only has like 25 million users worldwide. Why should Maserati be compatible with that? Or maybe you're thinking it's because I have the iPhone 7. Also an excellent point. Maybe this car is only compatible with the iPhone from the time it was built. That's a great way to build a luxury car to last. Now, adding to the interior woes, in an effort to make this car look sleek and coupe-like, Maserati sort of tapered off the rear window line, and as a result, I'm 6'3", and I don't have any room back here. My head is literally hitting up against the ceiling. Adding to the claustrophobic feeling, roll down the window, and this is only as far as it goes down. This is all the way down. Look at this. I got like 6 inches of window over here. Look how claustrophobic this feels. Get me out of here! Another one of the details that makes the Ghibli feel incredibly cheap are the dome lights. Now, you can't just press the dome light switch and have the dome lights go on. That would be too easy. Instead, you really have to jam your finger in there to turn them on. The result of this is when you push the dome lights, you can feel the entire housing on the ceiling kind of moving around like the incredibly cheap piece of plastic that we all know it is. The final and perhaps most infuriating detail in the Ghibli is the shift lever. My God, the shift lever. Okay, you have it in park. You put your foot on the brake and then you pull it. And if you pull it even a little bit, it goes all the way to drive. So then you push it back up to put it in reverse and it goes back into park. You try to push it a little bit less and you're in neutral. Then you push it a little bit more back up and you're back in park. I've never in my entire life seen a gear lever that is this infuriating to use. I can't believe anybody would have possibly ever signed off on this gear lever. There are also periods where it decides that it's just not going to let you shift at the moment, and then it kind of locks you out from moving out of any gear for a second or two and until it's ready. So the Ghibli lags a bit behind its luxury car competitors. In fact, the Ghibli lags a bit behind a 1997 Hyundai Tiburon. But all of that can be forgiven if it drives well. So does it? I'm going to take it out on the road and find out. And of course, to hear more of my thoughts on the Ghibli experience, click the link below to read my column on autotrader.com/oversteer. The first thing you notice when you get inside, you push the starter button, it sounds cool. I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't. Maserati knows how to do engine sounds, and this car is no different. It sounds really good, which is impressive because this is, at the end of the day, just a V6. And from a sound perspective, it really makes the most of it. It's good inside, but it's really good outside. It sounds great. Here's one of the problems you'll realize the second you drive this thing back to back with something else. About to floor it. That's quick. It's not that quick. In fact, at 80 grand, this thing costs, you're almost in M5 territory. You're certainly in certified pre-owned M5 territory. And this thing compared to an M5, the M5 would just start laughing and start giggling. Yes, make that comparison. Please drag race us. Now, this car is reasonably quiet, unless you really get into it and you want to hear that exhaust note. It does a pretty good job of keeping you fairly cocooned, which is how a luxury car should be. However, one of the things I've noticed is that the ride quality in this car is quite uncomfortable. It is not a comfortable car. The ride is tuned for, sporty suspension, so it's a little bit stiffer than most of the other cars. I'm generally disappointed by the interior. There is a lot of Chrysler stuff. I see at least 3 blank buttons as I look around, 2 on the steering wheel, 1 on the center console. And the plastic around the navigation system is just unforgivable. But that guy just stared at me like, oh, you got a Maserati. And that's the thing. I mean, you got to kind of decide about this car. You're looking at a 550i, you probably realize, most people who look at this car probably realize that the BMW, the Mercedes, they're all better. But they're not Maseratis. And for whatever cachet the Maserati name still carries, that's important to people. Now, if they keep making cars like this, I suspect it won't carry that much cachet for a lot longer. Transmission shifts pretty lazily. We've all kind of grown accustomed to dual clutches, and a few cars in this segment have dual clutches, and this does not, and the transmission just kind of, like, really? That's all you got? With that said, it's not slower than a standard torque converter automatic, but it ain't faster either. Now, handling is very good. I'm not going to just solely bash this car. Handling is quite good. It's impressive. I would say on a value for dollar and equipment level, it is last in this segment. On a driving experience level, acceleration it's sort of mid-pack, but handling it's probably in the top 2 or 3. However, the BMW is in the top 2 or 3 and all that stuff. And that's kind of the problem, isn't it? And it's also 15 grand cheaper. So to me, this car is incredibly hard to justify without one of 2 things. Either admit that you like how it looks and you like the idea of driving a Maserati, or you get 20 grand off. And from what I heard, that's what the dealers are giving. They're giving huge discounts, incredible lease specials. They're desperate to move this product. So that's the 2015 Maserati Ghibli SQ4. Is this car worth $80,000? Absolutely not. Is this a very good car? Absolutely not. However, I have noticed 2 benefits about this car. One is the attention. I've been driving this thing around Nashville for the last 3 days, and even as I've been sitting there fumbling with my iPod, cursing the infotainment system, people keep coming up to me and going, nice Maserati. So if you're the kind of person who cares more about image than pricing, reliability, build quality, performance, horsepower, safety features, equipment, then maybe this is the car for you. Another benefit, the market seems to agree with me about the Ghibli's faults, because if you look on AutoTrader at used Ghibli models, you'll find that early ones are starting to creep into the $30,000 range. Now, I don't think this is a very good car for 80 grand, but even I have to admit it starts to get appealing for about 35 grand. 35 grand plus one of those iPod FM transmitter things.